he came to the realization that there are trade-offs in life. Someone else may want what you have, and you may want what someone else has. The hand you're dealt is what you're dealt, and you have to make the most of it. There are trade-offs in terms of money and personal finance. Ultimately, the person that has all the money, they're probably struggling with something. They probably want what you take for granted. So I'm currently reading Mathew Perry's memoir. And if for some reason you don't know who Mathew Perry is and maybe you live under a rock, Mathew Perry is the guy who plays Chandler Bing in the show Friends. The reason I bought the book is that I read the reviews and it just seemed like if you're looking for a reason to find gratitude, it just seemed like a book that I could read that would help me feel gratitude for my life, just because it seemed like he had a very, very difficult life. And I just wanted to kind of hear about what he went through and, his experience. From watching the show, I could never tell. There was, you think, okay, these guys are all happy, Hollywood stars making a lot of money. They have a family. I wasn't really a huge Friends fan, but certainly a show that I've seen a couple of times all the way through, which I love. The thing that stood out to me about Mathew Perry is that apparently I found out that he had some Canadian heritage. Apparently, in one of the scenes in Friends, there's his Blue Jays hat. You can see his Blue Jays hat on his desk at work or on a shelf at work. Apparently, he was very adamant with the director of that episode on having his hat stay in the scene, which shout out to Canada, right? Like he represented Canada with that, and I feel like I felt some sort of a connection because he's this huge star, right, from Friends. Also his humor, like I don't know, I guess I related to it. Reminded me of myself a little bit, so that's why I bought the book. I'm going to be making a whole video just talking about my thoughts on the book when I get to the end of it. One thing he said in the book that really stood out to me was, spoiler alert by the way, one thing he said about his father. Basically the premise of the book is dealing with addiction, right? Mathew Perry, he started drinking at age 14. He struggled with addiction throughout his life. He compared himself to his father and how his father could have 5 drinks or whatever every single night and wake up the next day early, first thing in the morning, get on with his day. And he was a functional alcoholic or a functional drinker, I think. He was a functional drinker. And the thing that Mathew Perry said was, well, he was not blessed with that ability. Instead, he was given the thing that he calls the big, terrible thing, which is addiction, I believe. Haven't got to the end of the book yet, and he was given this big, terrible thing, and he was talking about, well, meanwhile, he's had to pay $7 million throughout his life for therapy, whereas his father hasn't. But the thing about that is, he says how his father didn't have to spend $7 million on therapy throughout his life, like he did. However, his father didn't have $7 million to spend on anything. And, Mathew Perry, he had this $20 million penthouse, all these things, all these material things he had. But he came to the realization that there are trade-offs in life. Someone else may want what you have, and you may want what someone else has. The hand you're dealt is what you're dealt, and you have to make the most of it. And it's not easy, right? We are actually very, very fortunate. For example, if you're in a first world country, if you have your arms and legs, you're able to walk, you're able to do things, you're able to do things by yourself. A lot of our problems come from our mind, and those are things that you can work through. You know what I mean? The way I think of things is, if you have an issue that is not a permanent issue, that there's no resolution for, which, is very, very unfortunate. It's tough, right? There are people in those situations that still make the most out of their situation and are in a much better spot mentally than, those of us that have it pretty good, which is you have a roof over your head. Physically, you're able to do things. We have access to the internet at our fingertips, which can hurt us or help us, right? Anyways, he was talking about trade-offs, right? There's trade-offs in life. The next day, I was walking in a parking lot and I saw this big truck. I think it was like a GMC Denali or something like that. And I was just like, damn, that's a beautiful truck. It must be nice having that in the winter. It must be nice having that, driving through gravel. Then I thought, well, what about gas? Gas, fuel must be very, very expensive. Parking, I guess we have backup cameras nowadays, so it's not probably going to be as bad as it must have been once upon a time, but maybe parallel parking, parking in a tight spot must be tough, right? There's trade-offs. You think, okay, this person has this truck that's a beautiful truck and it's great, especially in the winter. It's high up off the ground. It seems so sturdy and fully loaded, all this stuff, but the gas is crazy, right? Versus comparing it to a Tesla or whatever, right? Having said all that, there are trade-offs in terms of money and personal finance and all that stuff. Like, you could have literally finished school in 4 years, maybe got your MBA or got your master's or gone to med school, whatever, dentistry school, whatever, anything, right? Whatever career you wanted to do, you finished it in record time. Obviously, you have student loans, but you started working as young as possible in that career, in that field, and you're making a lot of money compared to your peers or your friends and family or whatever at that time. Other people are slower to figure things out. School didn't treat them as well. They kind of took their time to figure it out. They also have student loans. Many, many years later is when they started working. Other people could look at you and be like, wow, like they're so well off. They have this house, they got into real estate. What about if you bought more house than you can afford? You took on more debt than you can afford. You bought the fancy car that you can't afford. You don't know all these things, like your car payment should be no more than 10% of your income. You don't know that you shouldn't spend more than 28 to 33% of your gross household income on a property on your principal residence. You don't know any of these things. You spend your money, somehow you rack up debt because you think, okay, well, I'm earning all this money, I'm paying down my student loans. Suddenly you found yourself in like $400,000 of debt. Maybe you decide to start a business, whatever. You're in the hole. The trade-off is that you worked your ass off, you followed the traditional path, and you made all this money, but you were lacking the financial literacy component. And now you're kind of struggling. Whereas the person who was working minimum wage jobs while doing school part-time, not earning the highest income, doesn't have as high of a level of skill, but they were learning about financial literacy. They were learning, how can I get ahead while earning a lower amount of money? How can I save? They learned about investing while you didn't know about investing in the stock market. They made giant returns. They didn't take on debt. They learned about debt properly. They learned to live on less than you make. That's how you save. That's how you create wealth. You live on less than you make. You take that savings and you go and invest it, and you have your money make more money for you. That's the trade-off, right? You may not be the person who started later, is not providing as much value to society compared to you, but they took their time. They had all the time in the world. They had less stress because they were doing a less difficult job or whatever. Maybe they had stress, but it's a less demanding job that they were doing. So maybe they were able to have multiple jobs. They were able to save more, whatever the reason. But there are trade-offs with everything in life. Perspective is everything. I'm going to make a separate video on opportunity cost, but I just want to talk about trade-offs in this video. Even me, I thought perfect world, finish school in 4 years, get my CPA, be an accountant. Like, that's not how things work out. I'm so happy that things went the way that they did, because knowledge, no one can take that away from you. It's not a piece of paper. It's in your head, and your knowledge, your experience, that leads to, you could find your passion that way. You can find joy that way. You can find what you want to do, your interests, everything lines up. You have a channel like this, I guess, right? Ultimately, the person that has all the money, they're probably struggling with something. They probably want what you take for granted. The person that's, knows everything about financial literacy and is investing, they're not earning a high enough income at the moment. They wish they were earning a high enough income. At all times, everyone's in a completely different place. Just have gratitude. Continue to learn and use what you have available to you. You have resources available to you, and make the most out of it. Be resourceful, because there's always a way to get ahead, no matter where you're at. Whether you're earning a high income and you have a ton of debt because you made mistakes, or you have less debt and you're earning a lower income, there's also a way to get ahead in that sense as well, right? Because you have more time, probably. Basically, what I'm trying to say is there's trade-offs in life, and I'll see you guys in the next one.